So about a year ago when we were doing ITEXPO, I said to Eric Lanask, we need to talk about how visibility is created these days because it's completely changed. It used to be you had a lot of trade media, you had a lot of what we would call the media who covered your beat. So whatever industry you were, there was somebody who was assigned to that particular industry. Well, with the collapse of the media, especially publishing, print, that became less and less and less. And pretty soon the idea of a beat reporter who was just covering, say, Qualcomm, I used to live in Del Mar in San Diego County, disappeared, or someone who just covered Uber, gone. Now somebody covers Uber and they cover Lyft and they cover the public companies in transportation and they cover the taxi sector and they cover everything that affects it. And the same thing has happened in telecom, it's happened in software, it's happened in everything. Plus, the entire concept of earned media with the rise of the influencers has changed. Nowadays, there's a lot of media that you think is media when really it's been paid for by somebody, directly or indirectly. And a lot more of what you see is really indirect paid media or paid content, a phrase first coined by Rafat Ali about 16, 17 years ago when he actually had a website called Paid Content. And it was with his foresight. I've known Rafat since 2005 or 6, whenever we started the Nokia Blogger program. 2005, he was one of the bloggers I put into it, and he's since sold Paid Content. He started a publication called Skift, which covers the technology travel world. A lot of the analysts that you hear about are paid. A lot of the talking head experts that you see on CNN or CNBC or the networks who represent the, quote, think tank, they're paid. And sometimes they're paid by our guys and sometimes they're paid by the bad guys. You never quite know who's paying who. And then more and more of what we're consuming, whether it's our own content that we generate, what we call owned content, so you have earned, owned, and paid. Our own content, we hope other people pick up. As someone who has had a blog for 21 years, nothing is more frustrating than I get, can I do a guest post on your blog? There's been exactly one guest post in the 23 years ever on my own blog. And that was because Michael Robertson was a close friend and of, at that time, mp3.com, Gizmo Project, and a neighbor. And he said, can I post on your blog? And I said, yes, but it'll be the only time anybody ever does. And I kept my word. So he has the exclusive other post on my blog. But the idea was that we all generate our own content now constantly, or we hire companies that are known as content mills or content farms, and they crank out stuff and they place it elsewhere. But there's a problem. How do you make yourself visible? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because Alan and Jen have been doing this for a long time. I've been building brands. That's how I got to 58 exits. It didn't happen as an accident. It happened with a plan. Here comes Rich Tehrani.
Hi everyone, sorry I'm late.
Rich, they're scanning Rich's badge. That's hilarious.
They're gonna send you an email follow-up.
Yeah. Does everyone know Rich Tehrani? So, you're perfect time. I haven't introduced anybody. All right, so the whole idea here about getting visible is we're going to talk about how brands, products, service companies get over the moat, get up on the hill, and get seen, learned, known, talked about, talked with, but most importantly, they get visible. So with no further ado, why don't we start with Jennifer, talk about who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Hi, I'm Jen Dimas. I'm the Chief Marketing and Experience Officer at Telaris. And we're super happy to be here and to be spending time with you guys these last couple of days. We have just gone through a repositioning and rebranding ourselves, and I've done that bunches of times with other companies. So I'm happy to have this conversation today, and I think it is an interesting time to try and be seen and visible.
Yep, that's great. I'm Alan Percy. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for TelcoBridges. It's a Canadian company focused on building interconnect technologies for telecom operators. I joined them about 6 years ago with a challenge of helping them launch a whole new product portfolio and raise their visibility in the industry, which has been a lot of excitement, to say the least. So it's been good fun.
My name is Tehrani, and I'm the CEO of Technology Marketing Corporation, or TMC for short. We put on this event, and in my career, I've met with, I actually had more than 10,000 interviews with tech CEOs and marketing teams, et cetera, helping them at first telling their story, right, hearing what they have to say, writing about it, blogging about it, whatever it is that I did with that content or had a video interview, but also helping them craft messaging that is effective and really gets the point across to help them grow their businesses.
Okay, so let's start with the most basics of getting visible. We went through a questionnaire that we'll play with a little bit, but we might change it up a bit. You just went through a rebranding exercise. When you talk about, why don't you explain first to everybody, how many people know what rebranding is? How many think they know? Okay, why don't you tell them what it really is?
Well, actually, our exercise was more of a repositioning than it was rebrand. We did a brand refresh, which was a visual brand refresh. But really what we wanted to do, and this is, I think, at the heart of almost everything that we're going to talk about making your brand visible, it has to be clear and concise and differentiated in its space. And so we wanted to take an opportunity to make sure that we were that. There was a lot of sameness in the way that our market was describing its value and its impact. And we wanted to make sure we are different. And so we wanted to make sure that we clearly state that while we're communicating. And then, really importantly, as we're amplifying that brand, we want to make sure that we're super consistent about the delivery of that message. So it needs to be clear, it needs to be true, it needs to be evident in the way that we walk about on the planet, and we all need to be using the same words, showing up visibly the same way. Hopefully you've noticed our brand because we have it kind of all over the show. And we want you to feel those brand attributes, know who Telaris is after any kind of interaction with our assets, with our website, with any of our humans that you interact with, and that was the purpose of the practice.
So when we talk about rebranding or talk about branding or we talk about the brand narrative, we talk about the story, we talk about a story being, as Jennifer said, clear and credible, but it's also got to be compelling, but there's a fourth C to it. Everybody has a clear, credible, compelling story they think. But if it doesn't get contagious, meaning other people can tell your story as if you told it yourself, it doesn't fly. So you want a story to be clear, credible, compelling. And if you do all three, you can make it go contagious. And that is a great the best example of a contagious brand was Hotmail years ago. They sent out everyone, and also it's probably the birth of spam as we know it. Hotmail did a great job at that. I think that when you have a story, you tell it, but you want other people to tell it. If a story isn't retold, it doesn't get contagious. So you want that story to be solid, that others can tell it for you as if you told it yourself. And that's what legends are made of. Because a legend is when somebody else talks about you. But there's one other key component to the art of a good brand narrative, part of a good branding exercise, which you need the backstory, the facts. Coming out of the sports world, sports were great because you had the player stats. No question who hit more home runs that year. No question who has more rebounds. No question who has more three-point games in a row in the NBA. Steph Curry's at 7 right now, I think, of 9 three-point plays, something like that. He's tearing it up. But the idea is the stats are the facts. So you have your story, your legend, your backstory. And if you put all that together, it really resonates with your customer base, your investor base, your employee base, the people you're recruiting. Alan, how are you using this approach?
Yeah, so this, what's interesting is I had to launch a new brand. We decided to get into the session border controller business. So I had to create a brand and launch the brand from scratch. And when we do that, the first thing we really need to do is, come up with those personas. Who are we trying to influence? Where's the decision making actually happening in these organizations? And how do I kind of get in there, get in under their skin to get them to consider us as a possibility and start to build some brand awareness? And that was the kind of the ramp up to beginning to develop a strategy, a set of tactics to start to educate them. And then whammo, along comes 2020 and of course the pandemic. So we had been pivoting towards video, and then we decided that what we would do is create this instructional content for these engineer types who tend to absorb that kind of content. They're good, they're comfortable with long form educational content, and we focused on, building our brand and building this basically to become the knowledge experts in the industry through the whole pandemic effort, and still to this day now, since we started 6 years later, people still come up to us, oh, I watched your videos, oh, I understand, and they're really, sometimes they tell me things about, our products and solutions that were buried in those videos. So for us, it was really starting with, who's that person that we want to educate, and then just feed them that educational content, and it's just free educational content, and they soaked it all up, and so it was compelling, and then we put on top of it then case studies and stories and things like that as they started to evolve.
So I want to break that down a little bit and unpack it because there's a lot there. So Jennifer talked about clear and credible, and I talked about compelling and contagious. What Alan just talked about is part of the journey, the customer journey, the marketing journey, the information journey that's needed by everybody. I call that the boulevard of communication. If you've ever been to Paris, how many of you have ever been to Paris, France? They have these, if you go along the Grand Boulevards, you have houses of all different sizes, tall, short, wide, narrow, old, young, new. Some are buildings, some are stores, some are houses, some are apartment houses, some are churches, all along the street. Well, that's like the boulevard of communication. You've got a bunch of different pieces there. And those different pieces are what you want to say, who you want to say it to, Alan was talking about that, how you want to say it, he just talked about it, he did videos, but that could have easily been animation, it could have easily been a pamphlet, it could have been a combination of things like a downloadable PDF that summarizes what you just watched and gives it to you in digestible news McNuggets, snackable sizes. It could be flashcards, could be a lot of things. Could be a news release, could be an ad. Those are all the how you're going to do it. There's the where you're going to do it. And there's one other key piece. Probably the most important part of telling a story, building a brand, repositioning a company, is the when, the calendar. The calendar sets the agenda. For example, we're going to have Rich talk about ITEXPO because it's a great case study in itself about how you put all of these pieces together, actually. That's the key part of this is the when. For example, do you think you send out a news release during CES to say you're at CES? How many people would say yes? You don't. You send that news release out in September that you're going to be there, and you start pitching the product then, and you start lining up your interviews. It's kind of like sales. You go to a trade show, if you don't have appointments, you shouldn't be here. Really. You're going to get some new prospects, some new leads, but probably 10% convert versus the leads that you have and the meetings you're going to have. So same way working with the media, same way working with the analysts. You foreshadow what you're about to do. That's the when. Another example. You never put any announcements out during Apple's Worldwide Developer Week. Why? They suck the air out of the room. Nobody has any time to pay attention because Apple has already choreographed. And Apple's here, by the way. By the way, congratulations to Rich and his team. First time in at least since Macworld was closed that Apple has been at another event other than their own. So congratulations on that one, Rich.
Thank you, Andy.
So let's talk about how this all unfolds. You've got this event called ITEXPO. Used to be twice a year, now it's once a year. So you have 52 weeks from tomorrow to start working on next year's ITEXPO. How do you start getting ITEXPO visible so more companies sign up for booth space, more people attend, more people want to speak here at the event? You want to have people who come and buy conference passes, do sponsorships. What does that look like over a 12-month period?
Well, the first thing we do is we try to get one full night's sleep. And then after that,
Dave tells me you don't let him get one even.
Impossible.
After that, what we do is you're working with your customers, making sure that they have a successful event. That's the first thing, right? So you have to work the prior year. This is the 25th year of the show. It's the 41st event. So we work with our customers to try to get the audience that they're looking for in the numbers sufficient
to make them very happy. And once you get them very happy, then they tend to tell you they're very happy. And you write that down, you get them on video, and you disseminate that information. But not everyone is really swayed by that, because they don't necessarily believe those testimonials. So you just have to keep at it with re-signing your exhibitors and getting them up online, showing the momentum of the next event. So it's always a momentum game to the next event, showing how successful the last event was, and then continuing to grow the community of communities, because this show, with so many sub-events as part of it, is really a community of communities, like-minded, lots of overlap. The same companies could be buying from these multiple communities of vendors, but you want to just grow that community, overall community, and you get the network effect, and that network effect is basically where, like you said, we had 50 new exhibitors at this show. A lot of companies, which I've lived in tech my whole life, I never heard of most of them. I never saw them, never heard of them. I don't know how they found us. You ask them, they say, "Oh yeah, I heard about you," or "I heard my friend so and so," or "I have a colleague at this company who had a good show." And to me, that's actually maddening, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about, which is to get the word where it's propagating on its own. But for a B2B tech show, you kind of want to be in control of your own clients, or your potential clients. But it's literally, especially this last show, it's snowballed. And I guess we've gotten to the point where it's just somehow it's spreading out. And I think a lot of other events, what happens is exhibitors are happy at other events or not happy, whatever it is, but they talk at those events and they say, "Oh, I'm going to ITEXPO, you should come." And then more people sign up. So as long as you keep your both sides happy, right? We're a two-sided marketplace, right? You guys, thank you very much for coming. Those of you that are attendees and making this show possible. A lot of you are looking to buy or to resell products and services. And then on the flip side, we've got the vendor community, and that's the marketplace, right? We're kind of like an active mall for 3 days a year, where we're like a very small Amazon, three days a year.
What you're also saying is there's a large word of mouth that brings people to it, which is part of the contagiousness of the story. We talked about the 4 C's. You're credible. You've been around for 25 years. You're compelling because look at all the people here, means that something good is happening. But that contagiousness is when one person tells another person, says, "We're going to ITEXPO, you have to go," whether it's to attend, to speak, or to exhibit. And what's also important is Rich isn't paying anybody to do testimonials. At least I don't think so.
No.
So, I've been doing them for years. I haven't seen anything. So,
Nope.
no, I'm
Definitely
joking.
not.
No, that's the credibility factor we're talking about. Earlier, Jennifer talked about you have to be credible. That's the credibility factor. And there's Dave Rodriguez, the person who closed Apple, with his own Apple ID, I'm told. So,
I might add something real quick. I know when we make decisions about where to spend some of the marketing money, we look at our competitors and try to figure out where are they spending their money, and then try to, glean from their relationship with our competitors, what's working, what's not working. And we can watch their campaigns and get a read on it. Sometimes, we can, through the internet, we can dig out and see whether or not it's working. So I'd say, a big piece of it really is like networking. Figuring out who are your competitors and what are they doing.
well, what you just said, what the competitors are doing. When I ran sports marketing for Upper Deck, the first thing I did is I wrote a 10 commandments of what we will do and not do. One of them was we don't care what the competition's doing. Let them buy it. Let them go. We ended up being the 3rd most recognized sports marketing brand within 6 months by following that philosophy. We bought what we needed. We attended where we needed to go. Granted, I had 5 different projects running on any single day of an event somewhere in this country. Granted, I had news releases going out 3 days a week. Granted, I had an ad budget that would, make everybody blush around here, and a sponsorship budget. But at the end of the day, we didn't buy what we didn't need. And we also tied everything we bought to our product or our service. And that's the key. Too much gets spent. I'm sure Jennifer and Alan can talk about this. Too much gets spent because it feels good. It feels good. The CEO loves this because somebody got the CEO to think it was a good idea. That's not how you buy. That's not how you get visible. You don't get visible that way. You get visible by doing things that are tied to your product or your service offering. Jennifer, what are you guys doing to get visible?
Well, a few things have already been said that I'll just reinforce. The key thing that we do to be visible is we focus on the customer. So everything that we're talking about is what is the need of our customer. So in this case, our technology advisors, what are the things that they need in order to be successful growing their business, in order to understand what's coming next around the corner from a technology perspective? How do we help them with the skills and services that they need to accomplish their own goals? And then everything that we say and do has to do with that. So from a long-term perspective, in terms of getting visible, like Rich was talking about with this show, your goal for your brand is to be in the consideration set of your buyers when they have an unmet need that you can solve. So your goal is, what is that unmet need that you can solve? And then have your message. I don't know what the drinking hole is. It depends of who your customer is. Where are they? In a digital world, they're everywhere. I think you asked a question in the prompt that was like, do you do this or do you do that? And the answer is yes. You do all the things because you have to be wherever they are. So your goal is, where do your end users hang out? Where do they ingest information? Then you want your content there. And then you want your content to be relevant, to be authentic, as I mentioned, that really adds value and shows your unique contribution to that. And then you need to be in all the places where they are.
What Jennifer just talked about, when we work on an architecture of identity for a brand or for an organization or a product or a service, there's two sides of the coin you look at. From the inside out, that's things like your vision, which you kind of keep internally. You don't walk around saying, my vision is. Then there's your mission and values, which is what your company's all about and what you believe in and what you want to communicate. Then there's your positioning, which is, what separates you from the competition, where you want to be. They just went through repositioning, so they have a better understanding of where they are against other companies like them. But they see themselves from the inside out. Then you have the outside view, which Jennifer just talked about, relevance. What problem are you solving? Or do you have a solution in search of a problem? If you do, you have a much tougher time selling it because you have to figure out who needs it versus, we know that these guys need X and we can sell it to them because it's relevant. Is it timely? Is it something the market situation dictates? Steve Jobs at Apple never put a product out that wasn't relevant and solving a problem that the market already had. He just did it differently. Then you get into superiority and differentiation. What makes you better? What makes you different? Rich may remember a blog post I wrote in like 2007, 2008. Me too, me also, me different. Because so many people would approach Rich as a journalist, myself when I was doing a blog. We're doing this and we're just like blank. We're a transportation company just like Uber and Lyft. Okay, what do you do different? Nothing. Okay. Or I would get pitches about telephony services. I go, how is this different than what so-and-so did 7 years ago? And the publicist would say, we don't know anything about them. Well, maybe you should know your history. What makes you different? Differentiation is key, not being a me too, me also product. Me too, me also products are, you buy them at the 5 and dime. Next is ecosystem competency. How strong are you within your ecosystem? That's why you're all here, by the way. This is an ecosystem. This is an ecosystem that Rich and Dave and Michael and the whole team at TMC have built and Eric have built over years and years and years. We are an ecosystem. We all know each other. We do business with one another. Just had one of my clients have somebody walk in saying, I hear we should be working with you, which is good because we've been going through the elevation of their brand. And that's how the person came to the booth and led to a meeting. Next is team, because you're all a part of your company's story, and then is your sustainability, not in the environmental sense, but can you go the distance? Can you score the touchdown? Can you run the plays? Do you know what it takes, and can you withstand the ups and the downs and still be there at the end? So all of those elements, like Jennifer talking about relevance and what Rich is talking about, that is your story that gets you visible. And if you can't tell your story that way, it's never going to go anywhere, especially in the era today of, why do we have less media, Rich? Why do we have less lines of print and less lines of digital outlets? What's going on? Why do we have less media?
Really? Yeah, that's,
Really?
That's the question? Google and Facebook. And bottom line, advertising is what supports media. Like, for example, if you look at your local newspaper, there was a time when the newspaper was paying its bills based on its classified advertising. And if you wanted to put I remember in the New York Times, we're located in Connecticut, our headquarters. So if we wanted to hire someone, we had to get an ad in the New York Times. We had to call them and put it in by Thursday at noon or something, so that it could run in the Sunday edition, so you could get resumes. And so that's just one example of advertising that's moved online. But on a large scale, it's been Google and Facebook sucking the life out of the industry. And even when you run ads on your website, a lot of times you're going through Google as a middleman, so they're taking a piece of it as well. And so that has just made it really difficult for most media companies to make it through unless they have some other source of revenue, which is why, like most of you, I get frustrated even though I'm in the business. I feel like I can't go to a website without getting 6 pop-ups if it's a news story, right? Subscribe, you're not a subscriber, you've used up your articles, all the other messages that you get. Those are ways to try to monetize that single eyeball or pair of eyeballs. And if you can't monetize it, you're eventually going to lay off your entire team. And that this year has been, just the last month, I think, has been a record for media layoffs in a landscape where we've been seeing it for the last 3-4 years, 5 years at least. And I don't see how that turns around.
Another factor, though, is the democratization of content generation, right? It's not just media outlets anymore that are generating content, it's all of us, right? So there's so many more voices now out there, and that's what makes it,
true.
it challenging
That's
for,
true,
for
too.
our perspective in terms of being heard and getting those voices to amplify our message. But also, it's, you don't go to one source. I think you asked a question, too, about how what happened to the briefing. And
I'm getting there. You're constantly jumping
Oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry, I'm jumping
You're
ahead.
jumping
But
ahead.
I think it's interesting because who you used to brief was very specific.
Yes.
There were analysts and there were members of the media. And now you need to be in constant and consistent conversation with influencers, with anyone in your market who has influence over your end user customers. And so it's gotten much more difficult, but also much more opportunity for the amplification of your brand if you're in constant conversation.
And I would probably add too, with the search advertising and I think the shift to spend to the search advertising, basically has diluted the value of anything besides search or social. And the side effect of that is that now the newspapers don't have the money to, they're just not getting the ad revenue, which means they got to get rid of the people, which means the content sucks, which then nobody buys it. So then it's all shifted over the last couple of years. And at the same time too, I think people's attention spans there's so much information coming at you. It's that one pager, right? The advertisement has to be no more than a couple of paragraphs anymore to get people to absorb it. So that whole thing's all sort of created this like vortex of information and news where it's at home created, right, by the advertiser, and then it's directly advertised through search and then through social, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, you have paid search, you have paid social, and you have organic search, you have organic social. And a lot of times, the paid stuff isn't marked paid. And therein lies, you're talking about you have to work the influencers. I built the Nokia Blogger Relations program in 2005. It was the very first, Rich was in the program, Jeff was in the program.
Thank you for those phones.
You're welcome for the
Yeah,
phones.
thank you.
And you sent them back when they were past their life cycle. It was the very first ever branded social media activity by a Fortune 100 company in the world. Up until then, working with bloggers or influencers, they eventually be known as, was taboo. It was something on the bottom of your shoe to the PR departments. As a matter of fact, the PR department of Nokia hated the idea of what we were doing. they really hated me if we got them a lot more press than they ever got in the United States because of the program, and that's why it continued for 6 years. But we didn't pay a single person. And we had GigaOM's own Malik, Rich Tehrani, Michael Arrington from TechCrunch, Kevin Toffel and James Kendrick from JK on the Run. We had Matt Miller from ZDNet. All today, well, other than Arrington, today, high-profile people, or were in the media for many years, Ohm with GigaOM for many years, now a VC emeritus. What I'm saying is the model is shifted and the money is shifted. And now you have a lot of paid content that I was talking about earlier, but everyone doesn't know it's paid. And that's a bit of a problem in itself because the audience doesn't know that that's an advertorial. That's what we used to have to do when I was at Upper Deck. If we paid for the content in a trading card publication, we put the word advertorial across the top, even though it was written by a real journalist. So, Jeff, those of you who don't know Jeff Pulver,
Very popular.
I would like to say this, and I say this with all my heart and sincerity. None of us in the telecom world of voice over IP would likely be here today if it wasn't for what Jeff did 20 years and 3 days ago with the FCC that created something called the Pulver Order, which made voice over IP to be classified as an information service, not a telephony service. All the things we went through with Zoom and Teams and meetings and GoTo and all this during the pandemic would have been regulated by the telcos, by the states, to let the telcos do whatever they wanted. Our prices for phone service would be much higher. Things like WhatsApp and Telegram wouldn't exist, not the way we know it, without being charged for. So we all owe Jeff a big hand for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, we're thanking you. And but anyway, Jeff, you went through some of the stuff about getting visible with the old days of Vaughn, with Vonage, and you were one of the early backers of Twitter. You want to talk a little bit about how Twitter has changed the way, now called X, is getting people getting things visible, or did get things visible?
I think Twitter outlived itself, and where X is today is not necessarily a company I would have invested in back in 2007. However, I would, if we want to look to the future, so Twitter, so having a voice matters. So I don't know, somehow within 2 years, within 18 months of Twitter being put out, I ended up with, 500,000 followers, which is like having an entire small or medium-sized town follow me, which is a little ominous. And there was lots of engagement. I spent 5 years starting my day every day by saying good morning. And those very casual good morning conversations sometimes lasted 90 minutes because I had conversations with people all over the world, some of them for the very first time just once. And over those 5 years, I said good morning. There was a lot of conversations. I got to know people from all walks of life because there was an openness there. I wasn't selling anything other than good morning. And that engagement was really heartfelt and meaningful. And I've failed miserably to use social media to promote anything I do personally. Really, I never used Twitter to promote any events I did. I may put it out there that I'm in a town visiting. I did travel the Midwest in 2010 and had a lot of meetups for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because I was traveling the country with a friend of mine. But in terms of this whole idea of influencers, I mean, just pull it back a little bit. I mean, some of this is made up, right? It's because it was convenient to have a group of people deemed as influencers, therefore you're influencers. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Arguably, if you could go back in time and put some type of constraints around how some information that goes out is tagged so that we don't have a Cambridge Analytica scandal, a Facebook. Because I know those people, I know the founders of Facebook, and I can never look at them straight in the face again because of how they knowingly allowed all of us to be manipulated. This is not a political statement, it's just truth. And that worries me and scares me to this moment. But when I look at the future of content, I remember talking to a newspaper in Orange County back in like 99.
Orange County Register.
Yeah, oh my God, they were very interested. I had this theory that instead of selling display advertising online, what they should do is make it transactional. So give away ads for free and get a piece of the action. Act as if they're like a shot, like give their advertise, like if you're selling through me, it doesn't matter, because it's like either an ad is either worthless or it's priceless, right? Because if it's effective generating revenue, if you had a shopping mall, if you understand how leases work in shopping malls, you get a percentage rents besides it. And so take a slight percentage for transactions generated. All of a sudden, the whole business model for online advertising would have changed 20 years ago. But I couldn't get it. I got people on the surface very interested, but management wouldn't take that chance. Right now, I think the bigger fight is who owns the content. Because every one of us basically is a data point for revenue for somebody else. I believe the time has come for a revolution, evolution, revolution, whatever you call it, but where all of us get to own our data. So if you're a company that is disintermediating me, and you're making money because somehow you've profiled me, and you know that I love blockbuster summer movies, that I love coming to Florida and something else, and you're selling my data to somebody, everyone's making money in that deal but me. And I've been looking at business models that flip that, where all of a sudden the companies that get disintermediated from advertising are companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft and X and others, where we, the people, have the DNA of our preferences, and where we can find models where brands can go directly to the people with permission. So if anyone's going to make money on that data, it's us. And that effectively, because if you look at, let's say, Land Rover on average costs $400 per year for someone to go into a Land Rover dealership and do a test drive. But imagine, Andy, if I knew that you love Land Rover as a brand, if we paid you $100 to show up at their showroom and take a test drive, it's cross circuits all that advertising they would have spent, and you're happy, you're being paid, they're happy, they're getting people in the door. And I think that's where the future goes, is where we take back our own data. It doesn't help us with the news sites, which are, unfortunately, they're still trying to figure out click to pay and stuff, and some works, some doesn't work. But if we can find a way so that advertising is transactional, not as a blockage, but where we actually are creating value, because there's value to be had, we might be able to rescind those models. But when you look to the next 10 years ahead, I'm looking for the people to finally wake up and realize their data matters, and that we can collectively cash in on that.
So what you're really talking about is a direct marketing model where you target, you market to, you sell to.
With permission.
With permission, permission-based direct marketing. Well, we've opted into a lot of things. We just don't realize it. We want to get our permission back.
Yes.
I wish there was a universal opt-out and start all over again. Let's talk a little bit about educating the analysts, educating the media. And Rich, you used to do a lot of briefings. I remember, years ago we would schedule a call with you and with Tom and Eric and then others, depending on what we had to pitch you on. But there's other folks who get pitched, the analysts. Alan, you want to talk a little bit about the industry analysts today and the role that they play,
Yep.
and then also explain that they're not doing it for free.
Yeah, well, the industry analysts, I think, first of all, have done an incredible job with building sort of the credibility. There's a number of the analysts in our industry, the telecom part of the business, who it's taken them 10, 15, 20 years, to build the tremendous credibility within their readership. What I don't think a lot of people realize, though, is that a lot of what they're writing was paid content anymore. I think, there was a long stretch when I think some of the content was genuinely self-generated with the intent that the analyst house would develop this, they would do the analysis, they would do surveys, they would write a paper, then they would try to sell the paper, the resulting paper, to the various vendors. So, and it happens still quite a bit. We get approached and said, hey, we have an analysis on a particular market segment, and this is, the paper is $2,500 to get, a single license copy of. If you want to quote the paper, it's $5,000. If you want to be able to reprint it, it's another $5,000. So, that's kind of what the old model was. Well, somehow in the last 10 years, it's kind of flipped to another model, which is where I could hire the analyst to write a paper. I would basically brief the analyst on what I wanted them to write about, because I could educate them, and then it would develop a paper kind of centered around the topic that I had asked them to write about. And it has really turned out to be kind of an interesting win-win, because not only can I steer what they're writing about, but I also, by educating them about the content, have now made that analyst far more deeply aware of what my concerns or issues are. And then I end up with content that I can then reproduce that people believe is highly credible and developed by a third party as an independent perspective, which it invariably isn't because I gave them the content to write about it. So we're now in a world now where pretty much everything that you read that comes out of an analyst shop was probably paid for by somebody. And you should be a little bit skeptical. And as long as you understand that, I think you're fine. But I think if you haven't made that transition, you should, because most of what you're reading was probably paid for by somebody, and the analyst digested it and puked it back out.
The expression, take it with a grain of salt, applies. But actually, probably take it with a shaker of salt.
Or more.
Or more
Yeah.
applies. Because the old expression is a person is worth their weight in salt, as you've heard the expression years ago. It certainly applies there. They do provide good value. You talk to an analyst, so you talk to the analyst about your story, and then you listen to them tell you what's going on in the industry, and that's really important. So if you're paying them to brief you, or if you're getting them to brief you for free, even better, you're learning. Because they take the information from here, and they package it up here, and they show it or sell it to you here. So when you're talking about briefings, Jennifer brought up briefings, it's a two-way dialogue. You don't want it to just be a one-way street. You want to use it for market intelligence. How many of you have ever done an analyst briefing? Oh, you all should learn how to do it, because that's how you get your story out. How many of you have ever talked to influencers?
Everybody has.
Only a couple, only a few of you.
Everyone has.
Everyone probably has. You probably just don't know it. How many of you have ever responded or had somebody respond to a Harrow query, help a reporter out, or a ProfNet query? If you're not on the ProfNet list, if you're not on the Harrow list, and there's a couple other lists now like that, you're not getting in the story. Now, how many of you have ever talked to a reporter face-to-face in person? Someone like Rich. Oh, good. How many of you have ever gotten quoted? Yeah, quoted like 1,000 times at this point. The art of the quote, knowing how to give that money shot, you have to learn how to key in what you're saying when you're talking to a reporter, when you're talking to an influencer. There was a story that ran, I don't know, about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, all around the world, from a United Press International, or AP, I think it was either UPI or AP reporter, about my travel habits. And the opening line was, Andy Abramson sleeps on the plane like he does in a hotel room, because I was flying first class on Virgin and using all my points from American Express. But my name was the opening two words. So you always want to give them the money shot that they're going to make you or your company part of the story. You want to make sure that you're the first quote, the last quote. You want the last word. But you have to know how to do that, because there's a lot of people, Rich, I'm sure you've lived through this, who can't do an interview. They don't know how to talk about what they have to talk about. They talk in circles. They say, oh, I agree with what that person said. No, have an opinion, have a perspective. Be able to get visible. And that's what this is all about. And we are right on time for questions. Do we have any questions from the, dare I call it the peanut gallery? No, the audience. Yes. Everyone in this room is too young to know what that means. Any questions? Come on.
Well, I was thinking about it. I'll tell you a little fun story. This early in the telecom work from home days, since I live south of Buffalo, we get these horrible lake effect storms. So I wrote a blog piece, just personal work about what it was like to live, how nice it was to be able to continue to work because of voice over IP technology, even though there was 6-7 feet of snow outside, that we can continue to do our work, even though it's going to take days until we got dug out. It got picked up as a feature lifestyle article in the Tel Aviv newspaper. So that just started this ripple through the wire services, and I was like, how in the world did that story get picked up? But
Of course it did, because in the days of the news bureaus, the way it used to work is there would be articles that if you were an Associated Press newspaper or a UPI media outlet, they would take occasional articles and move it on the wire. It was bi-directional. So they would pump out a lot of content, but they would also find content in their different bureaus, and the bureau chief's job was to say, this story can move on the wire, and it would move on the wire. The story I told you about with my flying habits moved over like 1,000 different outlets around the world, because I did an interview with either AP or UPI. No questions? Seriously?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering with Jeff, what you think Google is going to be able to do about the fact that this artificial intelligence can game Google searches. So, stuff content, Google says, no, we'll recognize that. I don't know that they can recognize
Well,
content.
I think if what you're talking about is the birth of a new search engine, because if Google bypasses it, there'll be an opportunity for someone who doesn't. From Alta Vista and before that, from Magellan, there've been companies offering searchability on the internet forever, and so don't think that any brand you rely on today. One thing we learned about the whole internet is there's no such thing as customer loyalty, particularly things offered for free. So don't think that Google search is going to be your search engine tomorrow, particularly if they don't allow you to bypass that stuff, because there will be someone who does.
There's actually news today out of OpenAI that they announced, or at least it was the news broke that they're coming out with a search engine that's going to be partially powered by Bing. Now it doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily include pages that are generated by AI. It just shows that the generative AI market is going to breed a lot of search competition.
You've already got Perplexity. You've already got, what's the other one? Arc Search. These are two new tools that have come out that are a combination of search and AI. Yeah. So Jeff Bezos just invested $500-something million of either his money or Amazon money into Perplexity. So just like Rich is talking about, where Copilot is becoming a search engine derivative of Bing and tied in with OpenAI, and OpenAI is doing it because of the Microsoft investment. Microsoft's investment is all designed largely to preserve Bing as a vehicle to get people in, and also to take all of their tools that already rely on different levels of machine learning and natural language processing that Microsoft has spent years developing to tie in with. So, any other questions?
I just want to jump in 1 second. Just want to jump in on as a reply to that. I believe what you're also going to see is the death of keyword search, of AdSense. I think that the advent of AI open to the public changes the business model that Google went public with. And that absolutely, because with all this other information being available free, I'm not providing any stock advice here, but I'm just suggesting that the core business model that DoubleClick had, that Google had, those were great businesses 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But it's over. Forget about it. If you're doing SEO, you're going to learn a whole new marketplace. Right. I won't say more. We don't have time right now.
It's a game changer. Any other questions?
I wanted to talk about the owning your own data. The example you gave for the Land Rover, like what if me as a customer, if I know this is an option, I'm going to change my behavior to try to get selected to it, and I've no intention of purchasing.
Oh, then you'll be banned forever.
You'll be banned. You'll end up on you'll be known as a tire kicker. Next question.
I guess like overall, like how do you make sure the incentives between the customer and the brands are aligned?
That's
good AI.
That's what AI will help you do, because it's going to do psychographic profiles, demographic profiles. It'll also know your income because you've given information somewhere, if you can even qualify to pay for that car. Next question.
Ooh, good question.
Very good question. Thank you all very much. Rich, thank you for an amazing ITEXPO.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.